You are coming to the latest information, the most notable current events on the YouTube channel of Nghe An Newspaper, the digital infrastructure of the newspaper and Nghe An radio and television. To know what the program is about, you are coming to the latest information.
On September 21st, the Russian Defense Ministry said at least 3 people were killed and 16 injured in a Ukrainian attack on the Crimean Peninsula. The Ukrainian attack targeted a Crimean resort, which has no military facilities, the Russian Defense Ministry said in a statement. The attack took place at 7:30 p.m. Moscow time using drones armed with high-explosive warheads. The head of the Crimean region, Sergei Ion, said the area attacked was Foros, a resort town in the southernmost part of the Crimean Peninsula. The target was the Sanatorium Foros, a luxury resort near 4 villas believed to be home to Russia's political elite. A source told the Telegram channel Camwin that there were very important guests staying at the resort. According to the Foros website, the resort's restaurant was closed for special service on September 21. The Fur Resort was bought in 2016 by the Tatarstan Trade Union Confederation with financial backing from Russian businesses, including the TNEF oil company. The Confederation is likely acting as an intermediary to protect the real owner from international sanctions. A school building was also damaged. Mr. Ionop said our Ionop said rescuers were working at the scene and urged residents to remain calm. In Zavadopol, the peninsula's largest city, Regional head Mikhail Raviev said the Russian Black Sea Fleet and air defenses had intercepted a Ukrainian drone attack near the city. In a post on his Telegram channel, he wrote that 3 drones have been shot down. In recent months, Ukraine has increasingly used long-range drones to strike deep into Russian territory. The attacks have targeted Russian military facilities as well as energy infrastructure. Russia annexed the Crimean Peninsula in 2014 after a controversial referendum. The peninsula became an important logistics hub and a military fortress for Russia after the conflict with Ukraine broke out. Ukrainian forces have repeatedly attacked the peninsula with missiles and drones since the beginning of 2022. Prada reported that the Special Forces Unit of the Ukrainian Defense Intelligence Agency, DU, released a video on March 21st showing the destruction of Russian military equipment on the Kum Peninsula. The attack destroyed 3 Mi-8 multi-purpose helicopters and an expensive Russian Nibu-55 ZH-6U radar. The announcement said, "We have photos of the destroyed Mi-8 primary helicopter."
On September 21st, in an interview with Nghe Newspaper, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the European Union (EU) will not impose tariffs on imports from India and China as suggested by U.S. President Donald Trump to pressure Russia to end its military activities in Ukraine. Ms. Leyen stressed that the bloc's latest package of sanctions is enough to bring Russia to the negotiating table. According to her, the increasingly complex geopolitical environment forces EU member states to strengthen their partnership based on common interests, while affirming that a closer EU-India partnership is more important than ever. She also said the bloc will continue to coordinate efforts on both sides of the Atlantic as well as with the G7 countries to contribute to ending the conflict in Ukraine. Brussels has included 12 Chinese entities and 3 Indian entities in the 19th package of sanctions, accusing them of helping to circumvent restrictions previously imposed by the West. Until then, Washington had focused on trade with India and China, and in late August, the U.S. imposed a 25% punitive tariff on India, raising total import duties to 50% on most goods. And the reason New Delhi has not cut back on Russian oil purchases, its habit of dumping Chinese goods has risen as high as 145%. Beijing responded to Washington with retaliatory tariffs of up to 125%. After agreeing to temporarily reduce tariffs to 30% and 10% earlier this year, the two sides extended the tariff suspension until November.
After swift diplomatic campaigns on Ukraine and Kazakhstan, U.S. President Donald Trump has stepped back and increasingly focused on domestic issues. In late August, Pentagon officials met with a group of European diplomats and delivered a tough message. The U.S. plans to cut some security assistance to Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, NATO member states bordering Russia. A knowledgeable source quoted Pentagon official David Purr as telling the group, "Europe needs to reduce its reliance on the U.S. Under President Donald Trump, the U.S. military will shift its focus to other priorities, such as territorial defense." Some European diplomats are concerned that this move could embolden Russian President Vladimir Putin. Recently, Estonia accused a Russian MiG-31 fighter jet of entering its airspace for about 10 minutes before being forced to retreat by an Italian F-35 fighter jet. Russia denied the accusation, asserting that its aircraft only flew over neutral waters. Hours later, Poland reported that Russian reconnaissance vessels approached one of its oil rigs. Previously, Warsaw also accused several Moscow UAVs of entering Polish territory. The U.S. response so far has been assessed by observers as quite reserved. Trump did not immediately comment on the latest intrusion, waiting several hours before warning that the incident could lead to major trouble. After the incident in Poland, he briefly and cryptically wrote on social media, "It's time." This reaction reflects a gradually emerging pattern of behavior. After months of continuously proposing initiatives to resolve or mediate international hotspots, Trump now appears to be withdrawing from a diplomatic role. Instead, he is letting allies take the lead while Washington offers only vague commitments of support. The U.S. leader is increasingly shifting his focus to domestic issues, such as tackling crime, confronting what he calls left-wing violent extremism, and reforming a major visa program. After a tense diplomatic summer, including hosting Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska, Trump declared that Europe must impose strict sanctions on buyers of Russian oil if it wants Washington to increase financial pressure on Moscow regarding the conflict in Ukraine. While in the early months of his presidency, the U.S. president made significant efforts to seek a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas, he has recently appeared indifferent to moves by Israel. These steps are seen as undermining the prospects for a solution to end the war in Gaza. White House officials voiced opposition when Israel bombed a Hamas office located in Qatar, a U.S. ally, but took no concrete action. When Israel launched a controversial military operation in Gaza City, Trump also did not express opposition, even as European and Arab allies condemned the move, which was seen as threatening to derail peace talks. Trump's caution regarding the possibility of deep U.S. involvement in major conflicts is, in some respects, not surprising. Throughout his 2-year election campaign, he consistently argued that the U.S. military was overstretched. Political opponents even called him an isolationist. However, this past summer, a different image of Trump emerged, contrary to the expectations of some conservative allies. He ordered airstrikes on critical Iranian nuclear facilities to support Israel's air campaign in June of this year. From a NATO conference in the Netherlands later that month, he also announced that he would deploy additional Patriot missile defense systems to Ukraine. By July, he continued to escalate threats of imposing sanctions and tariffs on Moscow. Now, according to analysts, Trump is returning to his familiar approach. The veteran American diplomat, currently a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, David Miller, believes that Mr. Trump may have simply realized that these conflicts are far more complex and difficult to resolve than he initially imagined. Expert Miller said he would not be keen to do anything unless he saw that the effort and political influence expended were commensurate with the results achieved. President Trump's unexpected turns can quickly be replaced by a contrary decision. In April and May 2025, he publicly suggested withdrawing from the conflict in Ukraine but then returned with a strong level of involvement. However, the White House has not completely reduced its involvement. In recent weeks, some U.S. weapons have begun to be delivered to Ukraine as part of the U.S. NATO Security Assistance Initiative called Pearl. Nevertheless, Western analysts express concern that Washington's mild response to Russia's recent actions will push Putin further. Alex Bard, a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, warns that if the U.S. continues to retreat, we will see more aggressive actions from President Putin because he believes Europe is weakening and can be divided, especially without the U.S. backing it. Some European diplomats in Washington privately admit that they are exhausted by Trump's constantly changing attitude towards Russia and are concerned that if the U.S. president again adopts a hardline stance, the move will lack credibility. Diplomats believe this change was evident last summer. At the NATO summit in June, Trump repeatedly praised European leaders and then repeatedly threatened Russia with direct and indirect sanctions, while agreeing to establish the Pearl program. However, the summit between Trump and Putin ended in Western disappointment. There was no breakthrough, and Kyiv faced significant losses when the U.S. leader declared that a ceasefire in Ukraine was not a prerequisite for lasting peace. This view coincided with Putin's but went against the stance of European allies in a tense phone call with European partners on the 4th. Trump argued that European countries were expecting the U.S. to rescue them while they themselves continued to buy Russian oil, indirectly fueling Moscow's war machine. The following week, Trump told EU officials that they should impose a 100% tariff on China and India to punish these countries for buying Russian oil. An official said Trump considered this move a prerequisite for any action from Washington. Trump's supporters argue that he is only asking Europe to stand up for its own security. However, some diplomats feel this is a trap. The adoption of such measures in the EU would take a long time, especially since the bloc often prioritizes sanctions over tariffs. It is not yet clear whether the Estonian airspace intrusion on the 20th will change Trump's calculations with Russia. The U.S. administration also seems to pay little attention to the letter sent last week by Estonian, Latvian, and Lithuanian parliamentarians, calling on Trump to reconsider plans to cut some security assistance. A White House official said, "Some of our European allies are among the wealthiest countries in the world. They are perfectly capable of paying for these programs themselves if they wish."